Uplinking Jax's consciousness to neural projection network. Warning, IQ is sub 60. Continue with uplinking?
Yes.
Overridden. Good luck.
Oh, hello. Sorry, wasn't expecting anybody. Do you have an appointment?
No.
No? Oh, wait. You're wondering about my recent adventure to Furry Weekend Atlanta, aren't you?
No.
Well, too bad, because boy, do I have a story for you. Furry Weekend Atlanta is one of the big three conventions, and as of 2025 is the largest furry convention in history, with nearly 18,000 attendants back in May. FWA is unique as it takes place not in a singular convention center, but across 3 large hotels in downtown Atlanta. While this provides a bit of annoyance getting around, it creates a uniquely decentralized atmosphere that has helped make this convention become known for its low-key but very public social scene and a wild room party scene. However, you may be asking, hey, why is this random white dude going to a furry convention? Well, my friend, that is a great question, and it's for a couple of reasons. One simply being that I've never been a member of the fandom and have zero plans to join at any time in the future, but I've been around the community for a better part of half a decade at this point. I have many friends in it, some of whom I've met while they're already in the community and others who I've watched become furries later on. This is why I feel so strongly about it. To put my thoughts in perspective, wouldn't you feel strongly about any organization in some capacity if a bunch of your friends were in it? Anyways, I digress. A second reason I subjected myself to this is for a very different reason. If you're an older viewer of the channel, you'll likely remember this lovely video released by Mr. Clap Seal titled The Terrible State of Anti-Furry Journalism, wherein he proceeded to spend 30 minutes talking about my first ever video criticizing the fandom back in like 2022, after spending about 10 minutes brushing on other YouTubers who are well known for being more mild in their anti-furry stances, such as Turkey Tom and Ruben Sim. Anyways, after watching this video I said, okay, challenge accepted. I hit up some people I knew who were going to Furry Weekend Atlanta, which I'll just call FWA for the rest of this video, and hitched a ride with them. And no, I didn't just do the average random guy goes to a convention, walks around and fucks with people and then gets banned type of video. I spent 3 whole days there, in a hotel room with 4 other people. Safe to say it wasn't the most luxurious experience of my life, but anyways, it was important for the sake of making an actually useful video talking about the community for once. I also wanted to do something that has never been done before on YouTube, actually get engrossed in the community and force myself to spend time around actual furries rather than just going to troll or something. For this entire video, I want all the footage I took to speak for itself rather than me speaking for it where possible. For the video structure, however, rather than just vomiting a chronological vlog-style video with no outside commentary, I'll be using clips I took throughout the convention in various places as needed, with some moments featuring more footage than others, depending upon what I'm talking about. This is all in the effort to answer 5 major questions the outside world and myself has about the furry community. What is the furry community really? What type of people are in the community? Why do people join in the first place? Is the community inherently sexual? Fuck the laptop turned off. And is the community actually a good thing for the average person looking to join? While these are all loaded questions, I feel it's important to answer these questions to give the most broad and all-encompassing review of the community from an outsider's perspective. I want to make sure that no stone is left unturned and no questions are left unanswered for furries curious of an outsider's perspective and for outsiders curious of the lifestyle of many furries. So, without further ado, let's step into my shoes at Furry Weekend Atlanta 2025 and see what's really going on under the hood. This is apple juice, by the way.
Jax, you are go for the home and transfer to the Neptunian Furry Convention. Fucking weirdo.
I feel like the furry community has this continuing mist surrounding it, like a fog of war. Since the community is frequently a flashpoint in modern culture war commentary, there's always this back and forth game of tug of war that just completely destroys any healthy commentary around the community, as I pointed out in part 0. Whether that be half of the argument being like, well, you see these Furbies or whatever keep shitting in litter boxes in my kid's school. Now how the hell we gonna let that keep going on? It's ruining the great state of Arkansas. Meanwhile, the other half of the argument is like, no dude, this fandom is like nothing sexual to it. There's like 4 people who are in it for sex. The rest of us actually just
hang out in a giant book club once a month and talk about our feelings and reactions surrounding the classic novel This Hoe Got Roaches in Her Crib. Nothing inappropriate, really. In terms of content creation, it seems like there's pretty much two types of videos in this community. One, a random guy who either doesn't know what a furry is or just wants to troll asks a stupid question like, why are you a furry? To a bunch of people who already have their guard up around anyone who doesn't immediately strike them as a furry themselves. Or two, someone who's a furry making videos in their home community where they make no effort to help outsiders understand it beyond, yeah guys, we're completely normal people that just have a fun little hobby. Both of these approaches are heavily flawed, one for obvious reasons, the other not so much. The first type of video, to put it bluntly, just completely caricatures the community and gives people an entirely flat and two-dimensional view of it with no realistic commentary or overviews of life inside the community. The second type of video is flawed for a less obvious reason. Furries who make videos on their own group and community have naturally very little perspective on what it's like to be an outsider to their lifestyle, causing their videos to be either uninteresting or completely tone deaf, potentially scaring people away due to a lack of sensible outreach and understanding. Most furries I've ever interacted with are completely engrossed in the community, especially those who joined at a younger age. By engrossed, I mean that like upwards of 80 to 90% of the people they talk to on a regular basis, people they date, or people they otherwise have any kind of interpersonal relationship with are furries themselves. There are some outliers, and it's usually those outliers that I get along with the best, but largely speaking, there is this complete disconnect between how the outside world perceives the everyday actions of furries and how furries themselves perceive the response to it. At the end of the day, perception's reality, but it's always important to seek different perspectives on your own reality to help you form a better, more well-rounded understanding of, well, kind of your whole identity. Don't get me wrong, for the not only furries do this crowd, this goes for everybody on the damn planet, but furries especially, and that's kind of who I'm talking about in this video anyways. Unfortunately, what always gets brushed over is what the furry community actually is. Not its media-friendly caricature the community likes to showcase as its one and only attempt to help outsiders understand them, or the weird and hypersexual subculture many outsiders think it is. It's actually kind of an umbrella, if you will. In simpler terms, the furry community isn't a cohesive group of people who just like dressing up as animals. It's a spectrum of people who have varying levels of interest in the community itself. Some who like it just a little and are there with friends, or others who owe their entire social life to the community, and even non-furries who go just to kind of let loose and party with anyone who isn't just some regular white dude who has fun by shotgunning natty lights and watching SEC football, which, I mean, it's fun, sure, but variety is the spice of life, am I right? It really is just a loose association of people with a common interest. However, this idea of a simple, quote, common interest also really glosses over how deep this community gets, which I'll elaborate on more as we go deeper into the video. See how complicated this is? I think it really lends itself to the idea that the community is an exaggerated microcosm of humanity itself, all of our good sides, our flaws, and everything in between. I think it's also important to mention that there's really no one type of furry. For the rest of this video, I'll be referencing what I've dubbed the, quote, furry triptych when classifying a given furry or group of furries. Basically, it's a sort of triangle that plots every furry pretty much ever between three main types. First, we have what I call the yuppie furries. While those familiar with the term yuppie might be confused by my use of it, and for the furries, no, it's not a pun, I've kind of just started using it to colloquially refer to furries that want to do nothing but party. They do pretty much any drug you can possibly imagine, stay up till the early hours of the morning, and love having copious amounts of sex, and love having copious amounts of wrestling competitions with each other. I'll be brushing on these types throughout the entire video, so I won't be spending a ton of time on it, but just keep all of this in mind as we move forward. Secondly, we have the online furries. This is the community's most visible and explosive side in terms of population. Most furries just out there are in this subgroup. These are the most problematic types of furries as they often express both their good and bad sides to the general public, making them an accidental mouthpiece for the community in a sense. Oh, and like 50 to 60% of the furry predators fall into this category. That aside, most furries in this group are chronically online and have much more limited social skills. They're also the youngest on average. All of the people that were covered in the Twitter Files Part 2 are textbook examples of online furries, minors and adults alike. Sometimes a person is an online furry due to circumstance, like living in the middle of nowhere or being in an area that isn't exactly fond of the LGBT community, or they're an online furry for personality reasons like social skills and such. Sometimes they even use the cover and partial anonymity of being an online furry to cover their sociopathic or manipulative personality so they can act pretty much however they want with no repercussions, or so they can curate a perfected image of themselves for uses in inflating their own ego. Anyways, yeah, these types rarely go to cons or get out much at all. And if they do, they often eventually end up merging with either the yuppie furries or the next and final group we're about to talk about, hobbyist furries. These furries are what people think of when they make jokes about furries owning NASA or being brain surgeons. These are, in a sense, the empire state building of the community in terms of outward prestige. Unlike the previous two groups, these furries often have their lives together. They socialize outside of the fandom, and they treat the community as a hobby rather than a lifestyle, etc. Many of these furries are also neurodivergent and have special and unique interests that don't lie exclusively within the community. Think aerospace furries, trained furries, tech furries, etc. This is also the oldest group on average, as many of the first furries continuing up into the past decade or so were from this group of people. They partied back then, sure, but it's a very different, more low-key vibe compared to modern-day yuppie furries. Yet, they are also much more outgoing and socially established than online furries, making them their own distinct subgroup. However, it's within these groups you also find baby furs and often scolded subgroups that the community tries to separate itself from. A quick side note, when I tell you the amount of baby furs I saw at this convention, Jesus Christ. Anytime you see these, I think peekaboo hats they're called, something like that, it's almost always a baby fur, in case you're wondering. It's also important to note that very few furries fall exclusively into either of the three subgroups. Most are a combination of the three, but from my experiences usually fall between just two. It's also important to mention how much this community has exploded since COVID. Largely fueled by people becoming online furries and then transitioning to being yuppie or hobbyist furries once we could go outside and see the sun shining again. The growth of the community since 2020 has just been off the charts. It's leveled off a bit now, but even still, every year each convention is breaking its own attendance record, showing steady growth within the community. I don't want to get too into the weeds on the specifics of what type of people are at the conventions because that's the point of the next part, but I hope this section helped to clarify what I believe the community to actually be, rather than a vague caricature that so many conjure up in their minds when they think furries. Before we fully begin the next part, take a walk with me through the lobby of FWA so you can see my first reactions to the convention, as well as the little interactions I had that gave the place a unique energy you can't really find elsewhere. It's truly something special. If you want to see a more thorough video filled with actual real-life footage, join the 2 Buck Troop via YouTube or Patreon to see it. Anyways, here's the video. What's up, guys? We finally made it to the main con space. There's people fucking everywhere. I mean, absolutely any genre you could possibly think of with people here, which is kind of fascinating because, you know, it's a furry convention. But definitely we're going to check out all the different types of groups here. We got some, hopefully some like panels we're going to fall to later. But for now, I mean, we're just fucking walk around and see what we find. We're here with some slides. The other slide's fucking left. So, let's fucking do it. Oh! Don't even know! Oh, I've seen this guy before. Oh, is this one? No! Wait, is there any way I can like nose bump you or something? There we go. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. You can see, I mean, there's so many different like genres here overall. Oh wait, they set that up. We have to like pull up. So it's like kind of empty. Are we allowed to go inside? Yeah. Let's go inside. Dude, this place is lit.
You got the VR gateway over there.
Oh, we have the gateway?
Yeah, right there.
It's not even open, dude. Just let me go up here. Let's see what's going on. All right, my mic wasn't on before. Lesson learned to check for that. It's like the dance floor. Does this thing like light up?
Yeah, but only when they get there.
Oh, when does it start tonight?
9 o'clock, I think the next DJ pops up.
9 o'clock. All right, gotcha. We'll have to return for that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you could stay here and practice dancing. No one's looking.
I'm an instrumentalist. I don't dance, bro. I don't dance.
I don't blame you. I don't dance either.
The most I got is the frat flick, bro. That's the most I can do.
Oh, that's different.
I know it's different. But I mean that's the best I can do to provide the energy. Maybe a little bit of bounce to it too. Yeah. Hang on.
So long as you come to the floor at 9, got no issues with it.
All right.
Do what you want, but
might have to get a little bit more white boy wasted before we come out here tonight, but.
Shit on it, bro. I can join you. Yes,
hell yeah, dude. That's what I'm talking about. This energy we want. Is that like? That's got to be like decapitation. Is that against the rules?
Yeah, he killed me.
Oh my, yo. I better see that thing flying like a graduation cap during the rave. That'd be crazy, bro. Well, we'll come looking for you. Now, you gonna be here all night?
More likely, but I'm not gonna lie. I might step out. You know, I can't stick on the
No worries, bro. Yeah, if we see you though, Josh, I remember your name, bro. Nice to meet you. Let's keep walking. I saw this guy. Wait, I want to get a picture with this dude. It's got the White Claw scepter, bro. Over here, we get a picture with my boy. Leo the 15th right here. Or like, what, do you have like a furry pope name? All right. Well, we'll circle back. We'll circle back. Dude, I like this brick fursuit. That's awesome. That's so cool. And the axolotl. That's a creative suit. I like this. I'm seeing some unique stuff. This is like where everybody seems to be hanging out, though.
I saw an alligator around.
Really? Oh my! Hey,
I was telling my friend, I was like, I haven't seen any alligators.
we need to see more alligators. We'll find it. We'll find them.
Yeah.
Bro, your fursuit's awesome. I love the brick aesthetic. Like, where did it come from?
What?
Where did the idea for the brick come from?
So 2 Pink Floyd album covers. Dark
Yo, of course, dude. I grew up listening to that my whole life, so I respect, dude. Respect. I appreciate that. Can I get a hug, dude?
Of course.
Hell yeah, bro. That's awesome, dude. Nice, dude. Really creative, bro. Oh, that was like a Target I thought it was like a Target thing going on. That would've been cool, like the brand. I mean, a little bit, yeah, a little bit, exactly. There's definitely gonna be a lot more going on like tonight, though. I mean, tomorrow night is gonna be like insane, and just throughout the day too. I mean, it's kind of chilled out a little bit. I'm sure the rave will be popping, quote unquote, later tonight. We'll see. But I mean, that's pretty much the full loop. I mean, I guess we can walk down.
As I mentioned in the past, the furry community is not a cultural monolith. It's a patchwork of individuals all united under one common roof. However, a better question might be, what type of people are specifically in the community? During my time at the convention, I went around to multiple different types of gatherings and got invited to an exclusive party, all for the sake of showcasing the many different sides of the community in an even deeper way than my earlier mentioned furry triptych. For the sake of organization, let's go category by category and show off the different types of people I encountered at this convention to really nail home the idea that this community isn't just one type of person. And while I did interact with a lot of people, this is only a teeny tiny fraction of the subgroups that exist within this fandom. The first group are party furries, and you might be thinking, well, didn't you just talk about yuppie furries? Well, this is kind of like a subgroup within the yuppie furries. That's how deep this goes. A common thing at many conventions that, depending upon the crowd, attract a lot of people are the raves. Most of these are officially organized by the convention itself and feature furry musicians and DJs from all over. While my opinions on furry music are strong to say the least, most of the music was just run-of-the-mill rave music if you're familiar with that. Have you ever even heard of Gabber and Happy Hardcore? Like, they're cultural cornerstones of the community. However, later into the night, these raves were absolutely packed. I mean, literally shoulder to shoulder in the biggest convention space they have at this hotel. I mean, there's probably a good like 500 to 1,000 people all packed into the room during peak hours. I mean, it's alright. Everybody there is just kind of doing their own thing and dancing with the music. Including me, because God forbid a white boy catch a vibe, I guess. I'd say a surprising amount of yuppie furries are just partiers that enjoy wearing weird clothes and animal costumes. They pretty much tick all the boxes of being regular ravers or partiers, and a few extra ones we'll talk about later. This includes, for a surprising amount of them, copious amounts of substances. While I'm not going to give a 5th grade class discussion on different substances and their effects, some that I commonly came into contact with that laid beyond the regular alcohol, weed, and nick were harder drugs like cocaine, molly, acid, shrooms, ketamine, nitrous, poppers, and a variety of other esoteric, crazy-style psychedelics that sounded like 4-letter Roblox usernames. When I say drug use is pervasive throughout this community, I really mean it. I mean, shit, there was an incident a year or so ago where someone geeked off acid, bit someone's finger off in a room party. I mean, other than that, the drug use doesn't really, scare me. I don't care. And if people want to get into that, I'm not going to stop them. But it's something this community never brings up to the public that has misled people in 2 different ways. On the one hand, outsiders see the community as this kitschy and goofy subculture that likes dressing up as animals. And on the other hand, many see the community as being full of weird and awkward neckbeards who have never so much as held hands with another person in their entire lives. I'm sure some middle-aged guy from New Jersey just stood up out of his armchair while this video came up on autoplay saying, "No fucking way. I thought these were a bunch of weird, socially awkward douchebags. You're telling me they do drugs?" And while that is true for some furries, I think these party furries largely dispel the idea of, again, a monolithic furry culture. And seriously, let me stress, for this category of furries and all the other ones I have yet to talk about, these aren't boxes. Just like my triptych, many people stray between the subcategories or are actively involved in multiple groups. Either way, I'll be talking about these types throughout the video a bunch because most yuppie furries fall into this category somewhat. But next, let's move on to the fashion furries. A big thing at this convention were fashion furries. This was a group that I actually frequently interacted with. They put on a whole fashion walk thing where there was a surprising amount of people lined up to have their photos taken runway style. Some were in their fursuits while others weren't, which I think highlights how fashion is a hobby that spreads beyond the community. It's also a very passionate group of people who have put on some of the craziest fits I've ever seen in my life, and I mean that in a good way, and I really can't help but respect that. This group is great to touch on because, again, the outside world often thinks that being a furry is like a full-time job, and that it's the one and only hobby these people have. For many, fashion is just as much a lifestyle outside the community as it is within, and they almost carry into each other into a merged culture, if that makes any sense. However, something I noticed from this group, and something I'll touch on quite a bit later, is a silent cancer poisoning this community from the inside out. While it isn't exclusive to fashion furries, it's quite common amongst them in some amount. Ego. Yeah, dumbass, I know everyone has an ego. You don't have to comment it and make a whole paragraph on how I'm bringing up an issue with furries that isn't just a furry issue. However, in many circles of the furry community, there's this unending sense that everyone is just competing against each other, but is simultaneously trying to be the coolest and most nonchalant out of everybody else. I'll be going much deeper into this later, but it's something to keep in mind as we keep going. But moving on, let's talk about musician furries. I think this group is pretty much the best proof I can give of how the community isn't a monolithic culture. This is mostly because society at large has accepted that people can be musicians but also do other things. Like, my goat, my slime, Charles Ives, was a fucking insurance salesman but still made music on the side. Nobody then or today really batted an eye at that. Well, I mean, maybe they batted eyes at his music, but like not the physical act of making music, I guess you know what I mean. Anyways, this of course includes furries, a very tight-knit group. Furry musicians pretty much range in everything from Midwest emo to rap to electronic music, even to classical and jazz music. Actually, the exclusive party I was talking about, which was known as the Charcuterie Party, actually featured a live jazz band, a member of which we'll meet later on in the video. This group definitely leans more heavily into the hobbyist furry clade, but they're an inherently diverse group of individuals. These people were some of the nicest and most genuine furries I'd ever met, as many of them were just excited to talk about music, as was I, and were just having the time of their lives doing what they love for the people they love. I feel like that's an admirable thing regardless of what community finds themselves a part of. One of the guys I met was someone who had just gotten their master's degree in vocal performance, I believe, and was just singing an art song from the mid-20th century with his goddamn fursuit head still on.
I'm guessing it's just Schubert.
I was so impressed that I had to strike up a conversation with him, and this guy was so eager to talk about what he does in his musical history, which is a level of openness I couldn't have expected given my experience with the previous two groups in the community. Also at this party was an insane assortment of people from all walks of life, including the aforementioned fashion furries, music furries, and even other outliers that were all just there to enjoy this relaxed, higher class experience that couldn't really be found anywhere else. Next though, let's move on to a group that, on the surface, many outside the fandom wouldn't even think furries to be a part of. Car furries. While I didn't get to interact directly with this group, quite a few of the people I spent bits of time with fell into this subgroup. When most people think car culture, they think 400 people gathered around an intersection at 2 a.m. as scat packs and fart box modded Civics hit random people standing too close while throwing fireworks until the cops come and kick everyone out. However, there's a surprising amount of furries that I talk to that actively participate in their own local car culture scene and broader car culture outside of the community. There were some whole car furry mega meets on top of a nearby parking garage where some surprisingly rare and nice cars were being shown off, from antiques to modern supercars. But due to my limited face-to-face experience, I won't drone on about these types for too long because they post enough on Instagram already. For now though, let's move on to a group that pretty much everyone knows about: the artists. This group is pretty self-explanatory. They're artists, visual artists I should specify. They're the ones that make things that go into the dealer's den, which is like where all the furries set up tables and sell shit, as well as drawing art on Twitter or wherever else. This is usually the most commonly thought of subgroup the community has to offer, as visual art is obviously a popular form of personal expression and or a way of making money. Obviously, this brings up the discussion of NSFW artwork, which, hang on, we'll get there. But it's definitely a pervasive aspect of the group for a variety of reasons, one of which being money, like I said earlier. However, for some, it also involves satisfying personal interest, satisfying a niche subgroup's interest, or literally just for fun. Anyways, let's move on to the last type of furry I'm going to be talking about, the generalists. This group is the most elusive because they're often just hiding in plain sight. These are also some of my favorite types of furries just to run into because they're pretty much just looking to have a good time, kind of like me. Every now and then some random guy would just appear in our room and I'd introduce myself to him and strike up a conversation, and they'd be like, I mean, I'm kind of a furry, but like I just like coming out to hang out with friends and try to socialize, but I don't have a fursuit or anything. I also met others who were just content creators themselves or worked for other content creators, just kind of there to have a good time. Point is, with these types of furries, a good conversation about whatever is always in the cards, as they're only tangentially involved in the community. Maybe like the art, the people, or something else, but their lives don't necessarily revolve around it. A lot of the upping furries get their start as this type, sort of feeling their way through the community and trying out different things and subgroups until they find something they like. I'll also be talking about why this is the case later on in much greater detail, so be sure to stick around till then. Overall, I hope this section helped to dispel the idea that furries are some singular culture that you're either in or you're out of. In simpler terms, a false, vague idea of a binary us versus them. It's a broad spectrum of people who prioritize the community's roles in their lives in different ways and amounts. They also intermix their outside hobbies with their involvement in the community all the time. Sometimes the community itself gives people new hobbies they can then carry beyond the threshold of, quote, being a furry. And as I mentioned earlier, the groups I talked about are a tiny fraction of the other types of furries, some of which aren't so savory. Speaking of which, I forgot to mention the ones we like to ignore. I can't believe I almost forgot to mention the groups the furry community likes to pretend doesn't exist, or more often, heavily downplay when being confronted about it in the public eye. This includes groups such as baby furs, zoo furs, scat furs, and other groups which we'll just call undesirables from now on, that revolve around lifestyles or paraphilias that are societally deemed to be gross or undesirable. It's important to talk about these groups, however, not just because of the sheer amount I saw at this convention, but the dead weight that they become that the broader community is forced to drag along through their desperate attempts to achieve social acceptance. Most of the undesirable subgroups that exist are frequently a flashpoint between the community and outsiders, as the acts of the undesirables are so audacious and jaw-dropping to outsiders that people can't help but talk about it. This includes, but is not limited to, an interesting would-be incident that was leaked prior to the convention starting. If you weren't aware, which, you know, you probably should just skip a few seconds ahead so you don't have to be aware of it at all, a private Telegram group chat of scat furries was leaked detailing their joking desire to defecate in the public pool at a convention.
I swear to God, that's not me.
While afterwards, they also said that in all seriousness, after they were done shitting themselves in their little room parties, that they should go to the pool because the chlorine will clean them and cover up the smell. Like, Jesus Christ. Sure, if you want to play devil's advocate, you could say this is all private and they were joking around, but I mean, flip the script and say that a man was texting his friend that he wanted to commit an act of bioterrorism for the sake of pleasuring himself at a local pool. Everyone would be up in flames. Just be honest with yourself. Even if that was revealed to be a joke later on, how is that even, like, funny? Just think about that. Either way, interesting or undesirable, this community has a huge array of sub-communities and sub-sub-communities that aren't really talked about in the public eye. I think it's important to bring these different subgroups up to show the furry community really does operate like any other community of human beings, with the main difference being a per capita difference in many traits. As for those different per capita traits, we'll again talk about those later. But now that you're up to speed on what type of people are in the community, you might be asking yourself, why do people even join the community in the first place? And I don't mean some surface level reason of, oh, yeah, I just like anthropomorphic animals and I think they're cute. No, I mean the deep, core level reasons as to why people get involved in the community. While the reasons on the surface are just as numerous as the number of groups within the community itself, I think I've narrowed it down to a core reason that hints at the greatest issue our generation faces today.
But really quickly, we have to do Two-Buck Troop Roll Call! Unusual Chief Guy Finn, Yellow, Emma, Taboo TV Cat Bass, Jeff 2, Sokatone Soldier, Andy, Steel 56, and Maggie Gordon, alongside CNN, Chloe Beavers, Bo Gustav, Spec Norway, Nep, Callow Fox, Tibet Korkmaz, Rick Owens, Always Kobe Maria, Mika Henderson, and Game Boy Patreon, as well as Sasha, Zode, Half-Life Scientist Gaming, Devigen, Driggy, Alamovo, Blueberry Bandy, Lights Up Space, Mexa, Planet, Wild Sunny, and Emma Jane. And finally, Cyprine, Sushi 2, Tommy the Tax Evader, Aedra, Socially Awkward Dan the Content Man, Ali Elman, and Rat Consumer. Enlist in the Two-Buck Troop by using the link in the description.
A question that haunts every furry to their core when a white nest-headed high schooler invades their con space with a wireless Rode lapel mic and an unpaid camera crew is, why did you become a furry? While this question is usually answered with a generic, well, I like the art and animals, or there's some cool people here and I like them, these answers are intentionally surface level, and I can't blame them for that either. I believe this is the result of most furries' knee-jerk reaction to outsiders asking them questions like this. They don't answer the question with any serious depth or even really look deeper into it themselves because they simply believe that, no matter the answer, the random person interviewing them doesn't care at all about what they have to say and just wants to make a spectacle out of it. However, I wanted to actually approach the core reason why many people join the fandom. For this, I'll be combining knowledge I've gained through interviews with furries I met and befriended at the convention, as well as my own independent observations over the past few years. First off, let's talk about something I've mentioned on this channel before and feel very strongly about. The Gen Z loneliness epidemic. So many people in our generation, especially in the United States, have a huge issue with finding a community in which they belong. For those with a community in a sense, it could be a group of good friends and acquaintances, your small town, your family, or even your local bar. Hell, it doesn't really matter. However, much of the developed world, largely due to the internet and the gamification of socializing through social media, has completely destroyed the most important fabric of human society, being community. Those you feel safe with, spend most of your time around, and often find relationships through, both platonic and romantic. The most important social needs that nearly every human being needs can be found in a good community: friendship, sexual relationships, and romantic relationships. All three of these things, if properly distributed to a person's own wants and needs, creates a stable and healthy social network that can help support them through tough times and contribute to opportunities economically, physically, and of course socially beyond that original community. However, what if you're one of the people in this generation who, whether due to disability, location, or poor social skills, were unable to find a true community in any sense to be part of? Well, as expected, those three needs go completely unfulfilled. And what results from that? Oftentimes, things like depression, anxiety, obviously loneliness, and even physical health issues. So why did I go on a boring tangent about this for so long? If your attention span is in the Gen Alpha kid at a fancy restaurant range, it's because the furry community, well, gives people community. Multiple times, both on and off camera, I had discussions with people about why they joined the community. However, instead of posing the question that way, I asked it in a more thought-provoking way, I guess. Where would you be if the furry community never existed and all of the people you met through it never knew who you were? And, well, you can see based on the responses from an interview that I did, the answer is pretty much for the reasons I listed above. Take a look.
All right, so I'm here with
Casey Golden Boy, or just Casey.
All right, and we're gonna ask a few kind of deeper level questions. You guys can come through, no worries. We're gonna ask a few like deeper level questions about the fandom. And the first one I want to ask is, if the fandom like never existed and you like everybody you've ever met through it was not here, you never met them, where would you be in life, you think?
Dog, honestly, so like, I would just be like such a social like recluse and shut in. Like, I don't know, everybody like that I've met through the fandom, they're like from every walk of life, and like, I don't know, I just like all of my best friends and like anybody I've ever made like a really deep connection with has always been a furry. And I don't know, it's just like everybody here I'm able to like relate with very well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you think that a lot of that comes from the fact that the community is neurodivergent or in the LGBT community?
Oh, absolutely. I definitely like, I feel like I align very closely with that, and like I meet a lot of people that I just have like a really good like connection with immediately, and like I don't know, I don't get that a lot on like the normal world.
Yeah. Do you think like being a furry, like even just meeting people across the country, whatever, just the part of being a furry lowers that initial social barrier to actually like socializing, interacting with somebody?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like you have that common ground immediately with somebody.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's like you can literally just go up to anybody here and just like start talking about like anything. It's like, you know, as long as you have that one connection, it's like you can always revert back to that at least.
Do you think, just as a last question, do you think that like the main issue with like this generation socializing and all that, where people are like kind of antisocial, whatever, you guys can come through, no worries. Do you think a lot of that comes from the fact that a lot of this generation doesn't have community?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like we're like so like you know, I don't want to sound like a boomer or anything, but like everybody's like so like locked into like their phones and like social media and stuff that like it's really hard to like, I don't know, I feel like a lot of people like just regular parties, their first like instinct is just to like go on their phone. Like you see so many people like,
yeah.
I don't know, nobody wants to interact with each other anymore. And I don't know, I think being in the furry community, especially like having a fursuit head on, so like you're like away from like everything. It's like you're able to like be very mindful of everything and take in like the world and talk to people and stuff.
I think that's one of the biggest things that like a lot of people say, like a lot of furries say about their own community that people don't seem to get, is putting on like a fursuit head. And that's why a lot of people play VR chat too. It allows you to like escape your regular inhibitions and become something new and play a character. I love playing a character, not a furry, but I love playing a character. And that's why I brought a lot of shirts that are like, one of my shirts says, bro, I paused my game to be here, you're welcome. Like stupid shit like that kind of lightens the environment, shows people you're not too serious, which allows you to kind of like, you know, be more, I guess, in a character.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, Casey. We'll see you around.
Absolutely, thank you.
As you can see, my wonderful interviewee pretty much described the reasons I listed above. It gave them a sense of community that, in turn, helped them feel safe enough to finally leave their social rut. I think something a lot of people get backwards about the furry community is that while some people might join just because they're allowed to be weird or something and exist in a safe space, a lot of people join the community and eventually feel integrated in the community, allowing their weirder sides to come out, kind of like an inverse of what a lot of people think. Basically, in being a part of a community, they feel safe to be themselves, just as I mentioned in a more general sense earlier. For some more corroboration, let's go back to that charcuterie party where I interviewed Ankouv, a member of that jazz band I mentioned earlier. He echoed similar ideas to Casey about community and belonging.
Okay, so I'm here with
Ankouv,
and we are at the FWA 2025 charcuterie party where he's recently just performed double bass on. So as a fellow musician, I kind of vibe with that kind of aspect of the furry fandom. So one question I'm going to ask you that's like a legit question. If the furry fandom never existed and everybody you ever knew in it you never met, where do you think you'd be right now?
I don't think I would be as successful as I have been now, and it keeps me going with my music that I do.
Yeah.
And trying to propel furry music forward. That's what I really like to do.
Yeah. Do you think that the furry community's involvement with your music and your music's involvement in the furry community has actually like really helped like you become a better musician in a way?
Yes, it has helped me become a better musician because we come from all sorts of different backgrounds and teachings of music, and then bringing that together, it's like a melting pot of, oh, they were taught this way, they were taught this way.
Yeah.
And I like to converge and just agree on something later on.
That's a great point, because I know you're a classical musician, so you do a lot of the classical stuff, and I'm obviously a classical musician too. Obviously, I am a classical musician too, but obviously this kind of stuff gives you a different kind of lens where you're performing in a more casual sense and all that. But yeah, I mean, like you're playing in a very casual like place, and it's kind of more for entertainment, and a lot of, I think, people a lot of musicians especially don't get that opportunity that are more in the classical sphere. And would you say that's like also helped you in your educational studies as well?
Yeah.
For sure, yeah. Do you think being a musician in the furry fandom has like actually really helped you find meaningful musical connections outside of the furry fandom?
Yes, significantly. A lot of people are very interested in knowing what a double bass is, and it's nice to show it to people on what double bass is, because I can't count my fingers on how many times I got called a cello during this con, and I corrected everybody. So
it's a big cello.
Yeah, I always correct them every time. So, but it feels good to just.
I was about to say it's education. It's educating, right? Yeah, I feel the same way.
It means more people know about the double bass.
But yeah, thank you so much, dude. I really appreciate you for your time.
This searching for community and belonging is at the core of the reason many people join the furry community. Oftentimes, it appears that furries are a blank slate upon joining, and find their way around until they meet someone or interact with a subgroup that fancies them. This leads into my double identity hypothesis. And no, I don't mean furries living lives in and out of a suit or something, but rather a concept I developed while sort of processing everything in my head on the car ride home. It goes something like this. Every person on Earth, minus like psychopaths and shit, have two identities. A core identity where core personality traits and their true feelings and emotions lie, and a surface identity where their outward behaviors and interests lie. Not exactly groundbreaking, I know, but like, it's important to use this framework to help explain the actual psychological effect joining the community has on people. Think of the two identities as like a glass filled with both water and air. No matter how much water is in the glass will always be 100% filled with something, whether that be water or air. Now, replace water and air with the two identities and you have the picture I'm trying to paint. I think a lot of people join the community from a place of having an unclear core identity and having no true surface identity. What the community does is behave like a loan. It gives people a surface identity they can use to build their core identity. However, for those that can never build their core identity, the community will eventually replace that too. And that's where you get those weird cultish furries that in their mind owe every waking moment of happiness, pleasure, and personal growth to the community, much like those in a cult behave. Most of the furries I interacted with had built their core identity, whether that be around music, the arts in general, partying, cars, whatever. This is amazing because, again, that community and acquired service identity helps them build a strong and resilient core identity that will carry them into the future, furry or not. However, again, some people have the community become their core identity as well. This is dangerous because these furries will begin to take on behavioral traits of those stuck in literal cults, even if the furry community exhibits a passive, non-aggressive attraction compared to an active and predatory attraction from real cults. Let me know if any of this sounds familiar to you. 1. You've said anything remotely critical about the community and some furries absolutely dogpile you, even if your critique is actually valid. 2. You see furries cope to themselves about issues including NSFW content in the community and avoiding useless drama. You know, like petty stuff like kids getting fucking groomed. And 3, your friend becomes a furry and slowly stops talking to you, becoming increasingly engrossed with only other furries because that's their only way of being drip-fed things that tickle their pickle, like sexual romantic attention. And as everything else in this video is sort of described, people in this way also lie on a spectrum. Some only partially behave like this, and others are just so beyond gone it's not even fucking worth it. I'll elaborate on the consequences of this in a later part, but I also want to make one more comparison before we finish this part out that might have a few of you scratching your heads. Greek life. Those of you with laws enforcing 6 weeks paid leave might be wondering, okay bro, but like, what does some random guy living in the Aegean Sea who chain smokes for a living have to do with furries, bro? And for those of you who can commute for 2 hours a day and be fine with it, you might be wondering, oh, bro, like, literally what does Fidel and Signu have to do with fucking furries, bro? Let me clarify. Greek life for non-Americans, even though it does exist outside of America, is a huge cultural thing throughout the country, but especially in the South. I've been around this way of life in a sense since I was a kid, so I'm very familiar with it. Greek life from now on is just my way of saying American fraternities and sororities. If you're curious and want to see what it's all about, go search up like University of Alabama sorority recruitment and all your hopes and prayers will be answered. That aside, the amount of similarities between furries, especially yuppie furries, and Greek life I've observed are absolutely insane. The only difference being that one of these cultures has been a staple of American life for like 400 years and is entirely heteronormative, or so they say, and one is a relatively new countercultural thing. Yeah, I'll let you guess which one is which. Regardless, yuppie furries and Greek life share many of the following. Lots of sex, a recognizable community which you can bond with people no matter your distance from home, a barrier to entry, usually being money, a variety of subgroups that have slightly different focuses but largely still party and do lots of drugs, recognizable branding and varying levels of prestige in their broader communities, a huge ego problem, they're mostly inhabited by young people, they coagulate together in specific locations and often exclusively socialize with each other and those adjacent to the community, and can act as a jumping off point for making new connections and meeting new people, oftentimes giving someone a new surface and core identity. Again, the only difference between furries and Greek life, outside of like little things, is that one has lots of neurodivergent people and members who are in the LGBT community, while the other is seen as a bastion of traditional American culture and everything that's not like gay and trans. The main reason I make this specific comparison is to draw to everyone's attention to the fact that, in the grand scheme of things, furries aren't really anything new. It's just the surface identity that appears different between the two. And just like with furries, Greek life also has its fair share of scandals and stereotypes, usually both at the same time, like hazing pledges, spiking random women's drinks, and sometimes radical political beliefs in the current era. However, because this has been more culturally normalized, it isn't played up as part of any cultural debate or national intrigue, unlike the furry community. This is also to say that, just like with furries, not everyone in Greek life is a truck-driving, wife-beating, N-word slinging white boy. Some of the nicest dudes I know have become high-level members of their fraternities and have contributed lots of positive things to their campus and broader community. If there's anything I want you to take away from this section, it's two things. The importance of finding community and the realization that furries really aren't that different from other socially normalized communities in America and even much of the broader Western world. At the end of the day, we all have our vices, we all have our sins, and we all have our good sides, mostly. Those indescribable amount of differences trickle into the communities we're a part of and eventually become the group's identity as a whole. So, all in all, why do people join the furry community? It's both to find community in the first place and to live their lives, imperfectly I might add, with other people just as imperfect as them that share roughly similar interests. However, it is important to note that this community is not entirely off the hook for much of its behavior just because it can be compared on the surface level to something more socially normal in American culture. Furries have some issues that exist at a far higher per capita amount than any other community that they most importantly try to cover up in a dishonest and fruitless attempt to maintain face in a world constantly out to get them. Yes. However, is that inherently a bad thing? No, not necessarily. And before the 14-year-old tradcalf conquistadors from Macon, Georgia say, if it's before marriage or with another man, then I'm out. Disliked! Just, actually nobody's even getting through to you. Feel free to dislike the video. It's not even worth it. Anyways, this is a more complex question with an even more complex answer we'll dive into later in this section. But for now, let me explain my thoughts on why I think this community is inherently sexual. Something I want to make known is that this part is ironically more for furries rather than outsiders. This is because I believe the community's biggest issue is its complete oversight of how it's perceived by layman casual observers. The furry community has been conditioned by years of bullying to believe that pretty much everyone that isn't a furry will by default not like them. You know, Farmer Bob, Joe the Butcher, Kelly the elementary school teacher, etc. Because of this perceived social alienization, the community has collectively decided that it isn't worth it to try and reason with the outside world. Rather, it's much easier and less stressful to kind of exist in their own corner and to forget about the rest of the world. And you know what? That's great. This is definitely what I'd recommend from a God's perspective on any community or fandom that broader society doesn't by default really understand. However, an unfortunate side effect of this active separation from broader society is that furries have forgotten that culture spreads not just through active involvement, but through passive means as well. And in that vein, the furry community is one of the most universalizing online cultures to ever exist. What does this mean, you might ask? I'm basically making a reference to the language used by people who study religion. Essentially, a universalizing religion means that a given religion seeks to expand and adopt new followers through direct or indirect means, as opposed to an ethnic religion which often stays within a group or ethnicity like Judaism or traditional African religions. Examples of these are the big religions like Christianity, Islam, and even Buddhism to an extent. Before the internet, it was hard for communities like the modern furry community to exist outside of basically two realities. Small, tight-knit communities that encompass a small local region, and large, loosely associated communities that surround a common interest like Michael Jackson fans or something. With the advent of the internet, however, we've been able to see the rise of the furry community as a hybrid between these two. It spreads in a universalizing way to many different corners of the internet, but creates tight-knit and vibrant sub-communities within that give the broader community a stronger sense of identity. Because of this fact, the furry community really strongly, yet passively, encourages people to join for one of a variety of reasons mentioned earlier throughout the video. And because of this strong passive attraction, furries often don't even realize how much of an impact their community has outside of whatever dedicated community spaces they inhabit, online or in real life. By this, I mean that there is a huge amount of people that brush shoulders with the community quite frequently, whether that's through video games, social media, or in real life. These are moments when people form their first impressions, and as the old adage goes, first impressions matter more than pretty much anything else. Why am I talking about all this though? Like, why constantly nag the fact that furries have a large passive connection with the outside world? It's because I want the community to realize how they really do affect the lives of more people than they realize, which means they need to understand that not everybody is at their same level of desensitization or understanding of concepts regarding kinks, sex, and romance in the community. This wouldn't matter if the community didn't constantly complain about how the world is actually out to get them and that people hate them because they're primarily linked with the LGBT community, have neurodivergent people in it, yada yada, whatever. My point is, the community has its blinders on regarding its own perception from the outside world and even the understanding of itself in the first place. It's led to a stupid situation where the community wants to be accepted for what it is, but is unable to have realistic and transparent dialogue with itself about how the outside world may react to its various interests. This position is completely impossible to resolve without one of two things happening. Either the community entirely sequesters itself away on its corner of the internet forever to be ignored, which is unlikely to happen, is probably just impossible regardless, or the community needs to have a transparent dialogue with itself and the outside world so that people understand the true in-the-field reality of what being a furry is like. And that's pretty much why I'm making this video, and this part in particular. Now though, let's actually analyze this aspect of the community. In other words, how inherently sexual is it really? Well, I've got some experiences and stories I'd like to share with you all that I acquired during my time at the convention. For starters, I cannot begin to describe to you all the amount of events and room parties that directly involve fetishes of some kind or just straight up public sex. I had texted or talked to people I knew on the phone and asked them like what they were up to, and on a few separate occasions they were on their way to a room party specifically for group sex or something similar on multiple different nights, might I add. I've even heard rumors of some of these room parties turning into STI super spreader events with multiple people getting infected with some crazy disease. These were happening pretty much non-stop at night, and while again, let me stress, not every nighttime party at a convention is like this, I mean most are just regular parties, there's definitely a constant supply of them if you know the right people. Other events, like the Moonlight Rave, were actually run by the convention themselves. While not a sex party like I was just mentioning, it was a rave of sorts, dedicated to kinks and all related paraphernalia. Out of respect for people's privacy and the rules, I didn't film in there, but I mentally noted some of the things I saw. Rope bondage displays where you could have yourself tied up for fun, lots and lots of sex toys on display publicly to all at the rave, a whole area in one of the big rooms dedicated to pup play and people crawling around on all fours, people of all genders wearing extremely revealing clothing, sometimes topless walking around, lots of kink adjacent clothing like latex, a VR setup where you can play a sex game in front of a bunch of people, and just other general things that contributed to a lascivious atmosphere. There was also an adult dealer's den which had pretty much everything drawn or physical that was NSFW that you could imagine. From adult toys to nude body pillows with animal genitalia, general art and comics, etc. However, it is important to note that everything I've just mentioned was kept in separate spaces and meant for people 18 and older exclusively. Now, was I ever asked for my ID while being in any of these spaces? No, but I won't really say that's a fair point of criticism given that maybe I just looked over 18 or maybe they happened to overlook me personally or something. But despite all the previously mentioned stuff being in their own spaces, much of this community's issues with sexualization exist in public spaces that are not separate or age restricted. Lots of kinks such as latex, bondage gear, inflatables, yes that's a fetish if you weren't aware, pup hoods, and just generally sexualized clothing is extremely common pretty much anywhere. It's pervasive. In the all-ages artist area, there was a specific table literally selling NSFW body pillows of feral evolutions with only their genitalia covered by a tiny little sticky note.
There's something I want you guys to see here. Take a look to my left real quick. Oh my god! Yep, Pokemon Zoo feral zoo porn, just like in the 13+ regular dealer's den.
This was completely visible to anyone of all ages. The fact that the convention organizers and other furries seemingly don't even bat an eye at this, despite it literally being lightly censored feral porn in public, shows the insane level of desensitization this community has towards this type of content. Moving on from that, I even remember a couple incidents involving friends of mine being borderline sexually harassed by other attendees, but I'll let you be the judge of that. I believe it was Saturday night at the convention. I was out alone with a friend of mine who was dressed in pretty tight and revealing clothing. Obviously he liked it and that was his choice and prerogative, and it doesn't bother me whatsoever. But later that night, my friend and I had met up with some other people that were walking through the main lobby. By this point, we were both very drunk around the filming of this clip, and passed by some like random guy. He strikes up conversation with my friend and gets really close to him and starts talking about the type of shit he wants to do to him in a very aggressive way. Dude, it was like nothing I've ever heard. And I'm a guy who spent a week gambling and clubbing in Austin and Vegas like a month earlier. After he was done and my friend and I walked away, he said, "Wow, that's the first time I've ever been hit on the whole con." And I was like, "Nah, bro, that wasn't being hit on. That was like getting fucking sucker punched." Now again, nobody was really bothered by this scenario. My friend specifically said that it didn't upset him or make him feel uncomfortable, but this type of behavior to outsiders is gonna look absolutely out of control and be seen as not normal and like sex addicted. I get the community has a different culture surrounding romance and sex and all that, but some people might join the community not being told of this type of behavior only to get an ugly introduction to it without their consent later on. Don't get me wrong, I'm not clutching my pearls. Again, I do not care as long as nobody's getting hurt or feeling uncomfortable. But the community really needs to audit itself for behavior like this so it can properly and maturely warn outsiders and furries alike about it to prevent unnecessary issues later on. I even remember another person I was just like having a regular conversation with, and then like after this we stepped into the elevator with a bunch of people, and then some random guy walked up to him and gave him the old arm above the head while locking eyes treatment in the elevator, still while in an active conversation with me. It was borderline harassment by the arm above the head guy. At least that's how it seemed from my perspective. This continued outside of the elevator where I literally had to put my arm around the dude getting harassed because he looked visibly uncomfortable in order to walk him away from the situation. I know some furries are gonna be screaming some shit like, "Dude, you are such a prude!" Even for the sex part, it's like 5% of the community. And you, my friend, have just highlighted my exact point. The furry community is so beyond tone deaf about its own actions that it doesn't even realize that most people do not think publicly wearing BDSM and kink gear is normal. Most people do not find a passion for inflatables normal. Most people do not find latex normal. Most people do not think that a bunch of furries cramming into a suite to have a giant group wrestling tournament is normal. Yes, some people outside of the community enjoy this stuff, but not most. Again, let me stress, I am by no means saying that any of this stuff upsets me personally. I've seen much worse in my time. But the vast majority of people who are curious about the community and are receiving their first impressions online or otherwise will see this stuff and watch the furry community defend it like they're weird for not being okay with it. That's a very quick way to make enemies with the social establishment, telling them they're the weird ones and putting them in their own separate box. What happens when you make enemies with the social establishment? You never get a second chance to explain yourself. It's that, right there, that has acted against this community for so long. If you're a part of the "we like having our privacy" group, then great, I respect that, but please remember how much your community bleeds out onto the internet and other spaces without your control. People should know what they're getting into, not be hit unexpectedly by it later. That's how you get angry parents verbally abusing their kids for just casually being involved with the furry community. If the community can have mature, realistic dialogue with itself, then they can have that same mature dialogue with the outside world if it so chooses, but not the other way around. To reiterate one final time, is all of this stuff 100% a bad thing? No, not if the community is able to come to terms with itself and be honest about these things to those within the community and outside of it. As I mentioned in the last part, this community exhibits very similar behaviors to modern Greek life, just with a different coat of paint. If we persecute furries for this, but not Greek life, then we just become guilty of a double standard. If you have religious reasons to dislike this type of behavior, then fair enough, I'm not going to shake you of your faith. But for the rest of you outsiders, I mean, think about the scenario. You and a bunch of people from your close-knit community that you may also be attracted to are all in the same place with each other for only 3 days. Of course you're gonna get a little freaky with them. Those are the people you feel closest to on a platonic romantic level, and if you only see them a few times a year, that behavior is gonna erupt, forth with a certain level of intensity, because when you return to your studio apartment in Phoenix, you might have to go back to being alone and depressed. It's why post-con depression is a thing, but it's not some like unique condition. It just happens when you have your entire friend group ripped away from you after only 3 days. Of course you'd be sad. And furries, please stop trying to pretend that this community doesn't have an inherent sexual energy to it. It is all over the proverbial walls of every space the community inhabits. When you sugarcoat that kind of stuff and later people eventually observe the opposite to what they were originally told, they get confused, they get suspicious, they get angry, and they persecute. When you're honest, they might still get confused or angry, but at least they have a realistic thing to be angry about, rather than a cloud of suspicion causing people to conjure up stupid ideas in their head. Instead of that, they can make a more educated judgment of the community, and they can walk away with, at most, yeah, furries are really kinky and weird, I don't like them, but at least they were honest about it, so they know they're that way and it means they're trustworthy at the very least. Naturally, not everybody wants facts, and I get that. But wouldn't it be easier to have to deal with a few annoying people who just want to hate on y'all for the sake of being haters, versus an entire massive demographic of people who hate furries for an impossibly complex cloud of mis and disinformation? I know that like no hate at all is most preferable, but it's important to remain realistic about these things so nobody gets their hopes up about some kind of grand societal acceptance they hope the community will gain one day. As long as furries are like a countercultural thing, they will always be at strife with broader society in some way. But it's best to be honest about intentions and actions so the community can maintain its unique atmosphere and environment without facing constant external pressure for things that aren't even true. You don't want litter box stories to be a thing in the first place? Be honest about the good and bad parts of the community very publicly. You want people to stop thinking furries have relations with animals? Be open and realistic about it. Tell them that some do, or that some like the art of that, but the vast majority of people don't want anything to do with it and disavow it in large public spaces. It's not a perfect solution, but it's better than the bullshit information war that's going on right now, I'll tell you that. Alright, I've tired myself out on this idea. I'm literally making a whole video analytically dissecting the community's NSFW habits after this one releases, so that will examine those ideas from a different perspective. Now though, let's move on to one of the most challenging questions I've ever had to answer on this channel. This is probably the hardest question I've ever had to answer on this channel. While the answer to this question is entirely up to what kind of person you are, what your reasons for joining the community are, and what sub-communities you involve yourself in, I'm gonna have to say a very slight net negative. Now, this opinion of mine can change, don't get me wrong, and that's dependent on the community working on a few things I'm about to mention. I also don't believe certain characteristics like your sexuality, gender, religion, or etc. can really make an impact on this, but they can influence who you surround yourself with and can play a part in your personal experience, just like socializing in general. Anyways, let's get into my reasons so the furry community's greatest warriors don't scalp me first. Number 1. This community has completely gamified the idea of socializing. What do I mean by that? I don't mean necessarily that being a furry and socializing is like playing Dungeons & Dragons or Wii Sports Resort or something, but rather I mean that socializing in this community, a major reason many people become a furry in the first place, has been turned into a game of sorts. For example, it feels like furries have kind of lost the ability to casually socialize with regular people. I mean, sure, they have their casual and close friends in the community they see whenever, but locking yourself off to a single type of friend or friend group is where you become completely unaware of the outside world and have a serious lack of ability to understand how regular people operate. While this isn't inherently a bad thing, social diversity is what allows us to keep a head on our shoulders and better understand the world around us and the people that live within it. This is also the reason many furries experience quote-unquote post-con depression, as while again, it's totally understandable that losing most of your friend group for months at a time after spending 3 glorious days with them would make anyone sad, there's also a side of the coin that says, why haven't you forged connections with other people who aren't furries in your local area to fill that void in a sense? This is getting at the main point I want to talk about when it comes to socializing in the community. The community itself has gradually implanted this idea into the minds of many furries that if someone you're not talking to isn't a furry, they aren't going to understand you or like you, so just don't even talk to them. It's a toxic yet enticing mindset for a community made up of so many who have experienced loneliness or bullying for many parts of their lives. They don't want to feel left out and alone again, so why even try to talk to those beyond the community when everyone and everything you'll ever need is right here inside the safe walls of the community? This mindset seems to be relatively common amongst furries, and while not everybody follows it like the gospel per se, when I was talking to random furries, there really was a constant era of this guy doesn't know anything about us and doesn't care who we are. It was only when I'd sit down with people and actually talk to them that this stigma started to fade. From this worldview, there arises an us versus them mentality that becomes the root of all strife between the community and the outside world. A great example I can give is when this guy, Kale Fangs or whatever, within like 3 seconds of me telling him I wasn't a furry, decided to classify me and all of the people I was with, who were people he didn't even realize were actually furries, as normies.
Filming with some of my friends and shit, and I'm like kind of exploring the fandom on a deeper level.
Okay, word.
Yeah.
This is the normal. Got it.
Trust me, I'm not saying I was offended, and I don't think that was Kale Fang's intention either. However, it paints a very clear picture of this us versus them mentality I was describing that this community holds so dearly. What this does is create a strong dividing line that immediately pushes people away from the community who may only have a casual interest in it, but aren't totally dedicated to being a furry. It's almost like furries are inadvertently turning into the cool kids group or something, where they start to look down on social prospects with anyone who isn't visibly a furry. Now, again, this is nowhere near a universal thing. but most furries, I'd say, fall victim at least partially to this mindset. It's also part of the cycle that creates those furry cultists that I described earlier, where in certain furries' entire worldview is dominated by the community and those in the community itself, so it kind of becomes an attack against one, becomes an attack against all type situation. It's an extremely unhealthy and lame mindset that turns a community that is meant to be for all, regardless of who they are, into a community meant only for those deemed furry enough. But this isn't the only thing holding the community back. I think there's also another big issue that actually lies solely within the community itself. Number 2, the community is not only dividing itself from the rest of the world, but within itself too. This sort of goes back to the gamification of socializing the community thing I was talking about earlier, but runs quite a bit deeper due to the nature of socializing within the community as a furry yourself. An important thing I noticed about the yuppie furry clade was how often it seemed people were just there to show face. Maybe that wouldn't be their entire reason for being there, but during certain events, I just got this vibe that everyone was kind of on edge and trying to be the most perfect, curated version of themselves for the sake of social status or just the hottest person there. This ego shit is what kills communities. Again, it's so similar to like a group of high school girls or to how some Greek-like organizations operate. It's all a toxic game of popularity. There are definitely a lot of furries who don't fall victim to this game, but when the community's highest profile individuals all seem like they're playing a game of who can ego max the most, or who can dick ride the biggest ego maxer in the room and ride their coattails the most, it's gonna drive a wedge right through the middle of the community. As an example, I remember this one guy who I'm not gonna name just to avoid being toxic, who on the top floor of the convention center had an entire event suite rented out for himself, where he had his Twitter handle in neon outside his door with 2 buff drawings of his persona flanking each side of the entrance. And for what? Are you that self-important that you need everybody to know you have this massive room and that you plastered your personal branding all over this big-ass door of your big-ass room? Like, hello? Ric Flair? Is that you? I get some furries might say that's not a huge deal, but again, I point you back to part 4 where I specifically talk about how the rest of the world perceives this behavior and how new furries joining the community will see this and potentially be put off by it. Rather than my experiences that I mentioned in the previous reason where I talked about this standoffish behavior I got from other people by default because I'm not a furry, I also sometimes felt this standoffish behavior in general from more popular figures I had the chance to talk to. Rather than being from a place of nervousness and trauma though, it was from a place of ego and self-superiority. This is rare, mind you, but there is certainly a strong contingent of yuppie furries who exist to do nothing but be popular or ride the coattails of popular people just for the tiniest chances to be popular themselves. Again, I can't understate how horribly this will disfigure the community if this behavior continues to grow and fester. You gotta remember back like 15 years ago, the community was pretty much just a bunch of furries from the hobbyist clade hanging out and doing their thing in a very non-toxic environment, mostly, and maintaining that very accepting environment regardless of who you were. Now though, this growing contingent of yuppie furries has threatened that fabric of the community and are actively working towards ripping it to shreds for the sake of a vapid popularity contest between themselves and other random furries. Going back to the original question though, if you're a new furry joining the community and see this stuff, it can turn an otherwise happy and non-insecure person into someone that dick rides other people for social brownie points, completely ruining their original reason for joining the community, to seek community itself and to find good people to spend their time with. The furry community is quickly barreling towards a reality where many new furries are instantly swept up into the popularity rat race, immediately destroying any possibility of the community becoming a space for them to pursue self-improvement and actual productive change in their life. Other than that though, I have one more major reason for my opinion on whether or not the community is a net positive or negative. Number 3, my YouTube channel. Despite me being apparently an anti-furry journalist, I've had an absolute fuck ton of furries commenting on my videos over the years, largely from a perspective of fatigue with this community's serious issues. As I mentioned in my last video, I've had no less than thousands of comments from furries describing their experiences with grooming and abuse in this community, even from those they trust the most. Almost every furry who has joined the community before they turn 18 can attest to an incident wherein some adult groomed them, sent them porn, or many things worse than that. Of course, there are people who experience this as non-furries, but the per capita incident rate is so much higher in the furry community than anyone is willing to actively admit beyond, it's not really that bad, only some despicable furries do that. On top of that, because of confusion and anger created by dishonesty from the community, some say, well, every furry's a child groomer who says, some animals give me
a stiff wiener.
I wish the things I've seen people attest to in my comment section were all just fake or attention-seeking children wanting me to interact with them, but I simply can't ignore the sheer volume of insane things I've read from fans or just casual viewers of the channel. With all that being said though, please remember this is my opinion and is definitely subject to change. Among other things, if the community can learn to be more honest and direct with its problems and can learn to discuss them maturely without trying to hide anything or trying to appear nice and Disney-level squeaky clean for the outside world, I know the community will undergo the changes necessary for me to believe that it is capable of being a genuinely positive thing for those who join. If all of this ego-maxing bullshit, this us versus them divisionary rhetoric, and the predominantly sexual aspects of the community are talked about openly and honestly, even if they'll all still exist, then again, I know the community will start moving in the right direction. The furry community unequivocally has given an overwhelming purpose to many who have found themselves lost in this generation, hence the reason it exploded during and after COVID. Even if this community has a lot of issues with sexualizing itself, the fact that it gives a sizable amount of the modern generations a sense of community they would otherwise lack is a genuinely beautiful thing. I'm personally a floater. I've never had a community per se, but I'm one of the rare people that doesn't need that. There's a reason why I know a bunch of furries despite being a regular ass white dude, and that's because I enjoy meeting and understanding people of different cultures and lifestyles. It gives me a greater perspective on my own life. And in that vein, I encourage everyone watching this video, furry, anti-furry, a femboy, trans, cis, straight, gay, bisexual, white, black, young, old, or random middle-aged Dominican guy, to adopt this philosophy of life. You don't have to like everyone you meet. You don't have to be down with their lifestyle. Hell, you don't even have to be nice to them. I can't force you to do anything. But you'd be surprised at the personal growth you can achieve by just being curious about the world and going out of your way to have unique adventures. I definitely wouldn't be as aware of my own flaws were it not for this philosophy on life. And if you take anything away from this video, let it be that. Jesus almighty Christ, that was a long fucking video. You can tell I had a lot to talk about. That's how much of an anti-furry journalist I am, apparently. I spend like an hour talking about a random community I'm not even a part of just to bash them, I guess. Okay, sorry Clapseel, I'll stop being a dick, but all in all, I've had a secret this whole video that I've neglected to tell you all about. I actually had the same conclusion about this community going into the convention as I did coming out of it, minus a few small revelations. Yeah, this experience didn't really change my view on the community a whole lot, but that's because I've always had a moderate and realistic approach to the community ever since I've had friends in it and have had any modicum of care about it. But I want to highlight how important it is to seek a well-rounded and moderate viewpoint of things you maybe don't understand or don't really like. This goes for outsiders looking into the community and for furries looking to the outside world. I don't mean moderate in the sense of being wishy-washy about it, but more in a sense of understanding why certain people do the things they do or why this community is the way it is. It helps make life less of a mystery to be confused by and angered by, and more of a book you want to keep reading just to understand the story a little bit more. Sorry for getting existential here, but even on a small scale, it just makes life a hell of a lot easier to not care about shit that doesn't affect you directly, even if it's weird or not quote-unquote normal. But just to not drag us out any longer, let's start wrapping this up. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video, as it was a fun and interesting experience that I've never really had before. I really anticipate doing more fandom exploration videos like this in the future, but there's only so much I can film, so we'll see when the next time I can make something like this is. Hopefully this video has helped broaden your perspective on the furry community a bit, or at the very least has added complexity to your own thoughts about the community. And if you're a furry, I hope it's done the exact same, just from a different perspective, and given you greater context in your own community, and maybe helped you understand your own motivations for why you may have become a furry. Anyways, the next video in the Project Furry series that has kept getting delayed will release at some point. Yes, I promise it's real. I'm not pretending it's being delayed while in reality it's actually been canceled or something, because I'm not a AAA game studio. But that video will be going into excruciating detail on one of the most divisive parts of this community, its NSFW habits. That video will be considerably more focused on the online furry clade, but I'll definitely be roping in some discoveries from this video into that one for the sake of context and continuity. Anyways, until then, thanks for sticking around, comment slime if you made it all this way, and thank you for watching. But for real, the question you've all actually been waiting for, did it smell bad? Like once or twice.
I like furry, I like drugs, I like party.
On the back of this fucking bumper.
I like furry, I like drugs, I like party, I like party. Some people that can't know me.
Wait, what?
It do not matter, it do not
Dude, someone's dying in there, bro. Yo. Dude, that's type of...
I like furry, I like drugs, I like party, I like party. Some people that can't know me.
Hey, what's going on? That's what I'm talking about, man. Hey, right here. Yeah. Boom. Eat it, fatty. Oh, I know that guy.